video is part of our Qt C++ GUI Development Intermediate course, and we will be using the basic knowledge we learned from the Graphics View Framework chapter. If you are interested in these basics and many more things we cover in the course, you can check it out from the link here, which is going to be shared in the video description below. In this lecture, we're going to keep working on our Flappy Bird game. What we're going to do is put in a start button like this. We're going to click on this button and we're going to start the game. And we are also going to detect when a pillar hits the bird, and we're going to stop the game and show the game over graphics and all these things here. Okay, this is the project as we left it in the last lecture. The first thing we want to do is to go to the UI. Let's hit the UI form. We're going to grab a button. Let's go to the top and see if we can find a button. Yes, we have that. We're going to grab that and put it down here so that it is below the graphics view. We're going to say start a game here. And we're going to change the object name of this button. We're going to say start game button. And we're going to put a slot on this guy. Go to slot. And when it's clicked, we want to do something in the widget here. What we want to do is put the logic to start our game in the scene class we have here. So we're going to put in a method to start the game, and you can try and think of what we do to start the game. Let's try and implement this in the CPP file. And we have the method here. So what do we mean when we say start the game? We want to start the animations for the bird, and we also want to start the animations for the pillars. So this is really what we mean here. And when the game stops, we're going to stop all these animations, and we're also going to do some other things that we need. So because the game is going to start when we call this method, we don't want things to run by default. So we're going to go in bird item and stop it from falling down. Let's go in the constructor of this. We don't want to rotate by default. We're going to comment this out, and we don't want to start the animation for the Y position of the bird. Okay, once we have this, we need a way to start the game to make the bird do what it does, which is flying, going up and falling down. We're going to put a method to make the bird start flying. We're going to say void flying, and we're going to put that in the CPP file as we usually do. And after we do this, we're going to start the Y animation, and we're going to rotate to the location where we want to rotate to, which is to 90 degrees when it faces down, because we want the bird to fall down. So let's put that in here. Let's clean this up, and we can use this right away in the scene. So we're going to go there, and when we start the game, we want to say bird start flying, and it's going to start flying when we call this method to start the game. Okay, now we are done with the bird. We want to focus on the pillars. We want to only add pillars when the game has started. The way we're going to do that, we are not going to start the pillar timer when we create it like we did before, but we are going to add it only when the game has started. And we only want to start it if it hasn't been started before. So we're going to say if pillar timer, actually let's negate this, pillar timer is active. This method returns true when the timer has actually started. We want to start the timer if it hasn't been started before. This is what we want to do here. We can run the application and see what we get. We should only start the game when the user hits the start game button. Let's look at this, and it is what we have here. Now the user can actually go through these guys, and now what we want to do is detect if the bird has hit one pillar item, and we're going to stop the game. Let's go back and do that. And we're going to do that in pillar item. You're going to see why in a minute. In pillar item, we have the set y method. We want to go in pillar item, not bird item. Let's go in the header and show you the method we're going to use. The method that is going to help us out is the setX method. How are we going to detect that the pillar has actually collided with anything? We're going to go in this method as we modify x, and as soon as we detect that at this location in x we are colliding with another item, we are going to stop the game because the bird has just hit the pillar item. I know it might not make sense yet, but bear with me, I'm going to say this in a minute. We are going to put in a private method. It's going to be ball collides with bird, and it's going to return true if we collide with a bird. We're going to implement this in the CPP file. And what we want to do, we want to get a list of items that collide with top pillar and bottom pillar. So we're going to say items. We're going to say QList, QGraphics item, pointer, colliding items. It's going to be top pillar, colliding items. I think we can call that. Yes, we have this method, we can call it. This is going to give us the items that collide with the top pillar item here, and you can see the method in the documentation returns a list of all items that collide with this item here that you use to call this method. What we want to do, we also want to add the items colliding with the bottom pillar. We're going to say colliding items, append, and what we're going to do is bottom pillar, colliding items. We want to take the colliding items with the bottom pillar and put that in the same list as the items that collide with the top pillar, because we are just interested in knowing if our bird has hit the pillar item. We're going to include bird item because we are about to use it in a minute. We're going to do that. We're going to say for each, let's go down in here, QGraphics item, pointer item, inside colliding items. We're going to go down and try and cast that to a bird item. We're going to say bird item, pointer bird item equals dynamic cast. We're going to cast to bird item, pointer, and what we want to cast is item. We put that in here and we put in our closing semicolon. If we are successful in this cast, we're going to go down here and return true because we know that we have collided with a bird. Okay, this pillar item has just collided with a bird. If we loop and finish here and not find any bird item, we're going to return false, meaning that we haven't met any bird as the pillar item moves from left to right. Okay, I want you to take another look at this. We could have picked the list of items colliding with this pillar item, which is really a graphics item group, but we don't want to do that because we want to have some space between the pillar items where the bird can freely move without a problem. So that's why we check for top pillar and bottom pillar here. Okay, now that we have this, we want to be able to signal that this pillar just hit a bird. The way we do that, we're going to define a signal, and we're going to put that in the signal section here. We're going to say void collide fail, because the game is going to stop. The player would have failed if the bird hits a pillar item. This is the logic we are building for here. And we can't implement this signal. We're just going to emit it. And we're going to go down and work on our setX method. We're going to check and see if collides with bird, and we're going to emit our signal. And we're going to say collide fail. This is the signal we emit if the bird hits this pillar item. And we are going to use this signal in the scene to stop the game, because we want to stop the game if this happens. If the bird collides with the pillar item here, we want to stop the game. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go in scene and go where we set up our pillar timer. And when we create a pillar item, we want to connect that to a slot, which is going to stop the game. So what we're going to do, we're going to connect pillar item, and we're going to say pound symbol pillar item, and collide fail, and we're going to look for the signal collide fail. We have that here, we just defined that, and we're going to put in the lambda function like we usually do. We're going to capture everything in the context. We're going to put in our parameter list, and we're going to put in our body. We're going to go down here and close this. The first thing we want to do here is stop the pillar timer. We don't want to keep creating new pillars, so we're going to say pillar timer, not pillar item, pillar timer, stop. We're going to stop that. We're going to also want to stop the bird from flying, and we're going to stop all the pillars that are on the scene and freeze them in place. So what I want to do that, I'm going to go to the header file, and I'm going to put in a method. And it's going to be freeze bird and pillars in place. I know this is a lengthy name, but it is descriptive and I like it. You can name it whatever you want. The first thing we can do is stop the bird from flying. And I think we don't have the method for that. We're going to put in a public method, and we're going to call that freeze in place. In place. And this is going to freeze the bird in one place. Let's do that. And what this is going to do is stop our animations. We want to stop the Y animation. We also want to stop the rotation animation. I think that's what we need to do here. Let's see what happens. And we go back to the scene and say bird freeze in place. Now we can say that. Now, how do we get all the pillars? To freeze the pillars, we're going to do a similar thing to the pillar item. We are going to define a method to freeze that in place, and I don't think we have that. So we're going to make that public. We're going to put that down here. We're going to say void freeze in place. And we're going to implement this in the CPP file. And what we're going to do is stop the X animation that is moving the pillar here. We're going to go down here and put X animation and say stop. Okay, we have this. Now that we have this in our method in scene to freeze birds and pillars, we're going to first flag that this is freezing the bird. And we want to freeze pillars. So we're going to get a list of all the items in the scene and check each one to see if it's a pillar item. If it's a pillar item, we're going to freeze it in place. So I am going to put the code in here because it's really simple. Control A, Control I to align. We're going to get a list of items in the scene. We're going to loop around checking if each item can be cast successfully to a pillar item. If we can do the cast, it is a pillar item. We're going to check if the cast was successful, and we're going to freeze the pillars in place. When a bird hits a pillar, we're going to go back where that happens, and it is in this connection here. We're going to freeze, what's the method called again? Freeze birds and pillars in place. We're going to pick that up because I can't type that, and I'm going to call the method here. Okay, let's run and see what happens. We're going to run. Now the game is getting pretty serious. You need to be careful to pass through the pillars. We have the bird here. We're going to start the game and we're going to keep it flying. And when we hit that, you see that we freeze in place. We can hit that and you see that it's really bad. And we need to put in better logic to stop the game. So we're going to stop again and run the application. And we can play the game now and try to go through the pillars. And if we hit one, we're going to lose. We're going to stop here. So we need to put in a good logic to stop the game and be able to hit the start button again to start the game again. For that, we will go in the header file in the scene and add another member variable, which is going to say bool game on. It's going to keep track of the state of the game. We're going to store that in this variable here. And I don't like to have methods down to the bottom here, so I'm going to go up and define those at least here before the private section of the class. Now that we have this guy in, we're going to put in a getter and a setter for that, and we have that here. And I think we also have implementations for those in the CPP file, and we do. Okay, now that we have this in, the game is going to be off by default. We want to initialize that in here. Let's see if we can pick that up. Pillar timer, bird. We're going to use the initializer list here. We're going to say game on. We're going to say false. Okay, and when the game stops in here, when this method gets called, we're also going to set the game to be off. So we're going to say set game on. What is that called again? We're going to call this method and we're going to put that here and say false because we want the game to be off when we stop the game here. Now, we only want to do a few things if the game is on. And after we do this, we also need to set the game to be on when we start the game. Let's find the method to start the game, and it is here. I think we can say that here, set game on, and set this to true. We're going to put in our semicolon here, and we only want to shoot the bird up when the game is on. And we have an error here, we have a semicolon. Let's remove that. We want to go down in the mouse press event and the key press event. We want to do that only if the game is on. We want to do that. So we're going to say if game on. We're going to do that here, Control A, Control I to align this. And we're going to use the same logic. If game on in mouse press event, we're going to shoot up, Control A, Control I to align. This is going to work, but I still do prefer to put in my curly braces here. It makes the code much more readable. So let's do that. Okay, so let's do that here, clean up. And we're going to put our curly braces here. And copy this and put that down here, Control A, Control I to align and clean up. We can try and run the application and see what we have here. Okay, so let's try and anticipate things. The game is not going to run until we hit start game, and it is going to be off by default anyway. And when we hit the start button, start game is going to be called. We're going to cause the bird to start flying, and we're going to start the timer if it's not already started. We're going to make the game go on, and we're going to start our timer here, and things are going to work. So what is going to happen when we fail? When we fail, we're going to fall down here. We're going to stop the pillar timer. We're going to freeze everything in place, and we're going to set game on and we're going to stop the game and make sure we are in the off state. But we're not going to remove the pillars, because if we want to start the game again, we don't need the pillars that were there before. Let's try and see what we get, because some of these things, you need to see them to understand them. Okay, we have the application here. We can run it. It's going to run, and we're going to have pillars. But once we hit one pillar, we're going to stop the game. We can start again, and you see that we hit another pillar. We start the game again, and we hit another pillar. We start again, and it's working, but you see that we need to remove this remaining pillars from the last session of the game. This is what we need to do here. So when you start the game, we want to first remove the pillars that are in the scene. That's what we're going to do next. Okay, let's do that. So what we want to do is put in a method to clean our pillars. We're going to make it private. We have no reason to expose it to the outside world. We're going to say void clean pillars. And we're going to loop around and remove any pillar that we have. The method is also easy based on what we have done before. Control-A, Control-I to align. We're going to move this down a little bit, and we're going to clean this. We are getting a list of all the items in the scene. We are looping around through all the items in the scene, and at each iteration, we try and cast the item to a pillar item. If we are successful, it is a pillar item and we want to remove it. So we remove the item and delete the pillar. When we delete the pillar, the structure is going to be called. Let's go there and show you that. And it is going to be called here. And now that we are here, I notice a problem we've been doing. We are leaking the memory here because we're not deleting these pillars when a pillar item dies, and this is bad. So we should say delete top pillar and say delete, not delete later, bottom pillar, and this is going to be much better. Okay, let's go back to our scene, and you see that the clean pillars method is already in. We can call it before we start a new game. We're going to go to the start game method, and we're going to clean all the pillars. We're going to say clean pillars before we start the pillar timer. And I think this is going to clean things up for us. We can run the application again. We have the app here. We can start the game, and we are playing. We lose. We start again. You see that the pillars are coming. We lose. And we can keep doing this as much as we like. But you see that the game is actually taking shape. And we can both use the mouse to press in here to shoot the bird up, or we can use the space key on the keyboard to do this. And you can see that I am really terrible at this game, but I don't care. My job here is to build the game and get you to know all these things. Okay, the game is almost done by now. What we want to do is show the graphics when you lose to let you know that you have lost. And we also want to keep track of the score as the bird moves through each pillar item. We're going to increase the score by 1. And you're going to see how this works in a minute. It is pretty simple. The first thing we need to do is to put in integers to keep track of the scores. We want 1 for the max score. We also want another one for the score of the current session of the game. So we are going to go down here and put those in, score and best score. They are going to be 0 by default, so let's initialize those because it's good practice. Score, do we have score first? Let's see the order. Yes, score first. We're going to say score here. Score, not seen. We're going to make that 0 by default, and we're going to put in our best score here, and it's going to be 0 also by default. So what we want is to increment this as a pillar gets past the bird without hitting the bird. We're going to put that logic in pillar item because it is easier to do there in our setX method. What we're going to check for is if the pillar has actually passed by the bird. We're going to put in a bool flag in the header here. You're going to see what this flag is going to do in a minute. We're going to call this past bird, and we're going to make this false by default. Let's go in here, and I think we can do that. Past bird, it's going to be false. And when this pillar gets past the bird, we're going to set this to true so that we don't keep checking for that in the setX method here. Let's go down and find the method. Do we have that? I can't even find it. The method is here. What we're going to say here is if x is greater than 0, because that will mean that the pillar item is not at 0 position yet. And we want to check if not past bird yet. Okay, so we're going to get in. Once we get in, we're going to know, we are going to say if x is less than 0. This time we're going to know that the pillar just gets past the bird. And we want to also check if not past bird. And if we get in here, we're going to set past bird to true so that this block of code is not executed yet. I hope this makes sense. Once we get in here, we want to actually increment the score in the scene. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to get the scene of this item. We are going to say QGraphics scene pointer m scene equals scene. We're going to get that. Do we have that class included here? Yes, we do. So we are fine. After that, we're going to try and cast that to our custom scene. And I don't think we have that included. Let's do that. We're going to include scene. And let's go down again. And we're going to say scene pointer my scene equals dynamic cast. We want to cast to scene pointer, and what we want to cast is my scene here, or m scene. You can name these things however you want. And or I should say, if we can cast and store the casted value in my scene, we're going to fall in here and we're going to call a method to increment the score. We don't have this method yet, but we're going to define it. We're going to say my scene increment score, and we're going to go in my scene and actually put this method in. We're going to make it public. We're going to say void increment score, and we're going to do that. We're going to refactor and do this in the CPP file, and if you go back to our pillar item, this method should be in by now, and it is here. So we are fine. We can go back in our scene and finish up this method. What we're going to do in here is really simple. We're going to say score plus plus. We're going to increment that and say if score is greater than best score, we're going to change best score to be the current score. Simple, right? Okay, now we are keeping track of the score, and we can put in a few debug statements to show some things. We're going to include qdebug. Let's go down again and look at this method. If I can find it, we're going to say qdebug score is going to be score. Let's say score here, and a qdebug, or we should do this in one line. This is going to be better, best score, and it's going to be best score to make sure this actually works. So each time we get past the bird, we're going to increment the score. And let's run and see this in action. We're going to pay attention to our debug output pane. And let's make sure to actually open that. Let's bring up our game here, and we can try and get past. We didn't get past 1. We can try again, and we lose again. We can try again, and you see that we are moving forward. I can't pass 1. I am really bad. What is happening here? Okay, let's get past 2, and you see that we are incrementing the score, and as we increment, the best score is also increasing. So this is good sign that our code is actually working the way we want. So when we lose, we want to show the graphics for game over. We're going to show the image here saying game over, and we're going to show the best score and all these things here. We're going to do that. And this is going to be the last part of this lecture. It is really lengthy, and I hope we're going to finish the game and you're going to see it run. So to show the game over graphics, we're going to have to define a few member variables for the things we're going to need. Control A, Control I to align. You can see that this is a pixmap that is going to say game over, and this is the text item that is going to show our score. What we want to do, we want to define two methods. One is going to show the game over graphics, void show game over graphics, and we want to hide that when we start a new game. So we're going to say void hide game over graphics, and we're going to do that here. We're going to implement these guys in the CPP file. Let's do that. Hide game over graphics. We're going to do that in the CPP file. The first thing we want to do here is initialize our game over pix. So we're going to initialize that to be a new QGraphics pixmap item. And we're going to pass in a pixmap, QPixmap, and we're going to give it the path to our game over pixmap. We're going to copy this and we're going to put that in here, and I think this is going to work. We want to add that guy to the scene and put it in position. And what we are really doing here is moving it in the center. We are starting from 0, 0 and subtracting half the width in X and half the height in Y. And this is going to put it in the center of the scene. We are also going to initialize our score text item, and it's going to be a graphics text item. And I don't think we have used this before, but it is a class that allows you to put text in your scene, provide text item that you can add to a scene, and you can do all kinds of crazy things about text in here. What we're going to do is use it to show the score. So we're going to prepare a string of our score. So we're going to go down here and put in our HTML string. You see that it is really showing the score. We say score, we put in our score. We say best score, we put in our best score, and we're going to set this text to be displayed by this item here. So we are going to set a bunch of properties on our score item, score text item, I should say. We give it the HTML text, we give it a font that we define here. We're going to give it the default text color, and we add that to the scene to be displayed. After that, we want to make sure it is displayed correctly. You see that we move it a little bit to the left and to the bottom so that it doesn't collide with other things, with the game over graphics here. And we are done with this method here. Next up, we want to work on the hide game over graphics method, which is down here. And this method is really simple in nature. We're going to Control A, Control I to align. We check to see if we have a valid object on the scene. If we do, we're going to remove that. We're going to release the memory, and we're going to set this pointer to null, making sure next time we create a new one, we don't write over existing space. We do the same for score text item, and it is really simple. So now that we have this, we should use that when the game ends and when we start the game. When we start the game, we want to hide game over graphics. So let's go where we start the game. I can't find that. This is when we end the game. So we should show game over graphics. Let's do that. Show game over graphics. This method is not even recognized, but we can copy that from here and go back in the CPP file and put that in here. We want to show the game over graphics when we end the game, and the game is going to end when one pillar collides with the bird. Let's find the method where we start the game, and it is here, and we want to hide game over graphics. We can run. Okay, so we can start the game, and if we lose, it's going to give us our lose value. You see that The data is not fitting in here, but we can try and close the application, go to widget UI and try to make this a little wider. We can do that. Run again. We have the game here. We can start the game and we can move past through the items, and you see that it's giving me best score 2. My score is 2. I can start again and you see that score is 2, but my score is still 2. So we have something we haven't done when we stop the game. Okay, so when we start the game, we need to reset the score to 0, but we don't want to reset the best score because we want to keep that in as the application is running. So when we start the game, we want to say, do we have a setter for that? Because I don't want to manipulate my member variables directly when I modify them in that place. So I'm going to put in a setter for the score, create setter method. And I have that here. And I'm going to go back in the CPP file and set score. Set score. What is it called? It's called set score. So let's call that. We're going to copy this. And you can see that sometimes Qt Creator is really not helpful in auto-completing stuff for you, but it is what we have and we just have to use it. We can run. We have the game here. We can start it and try to not lose. We're going to go in. And this is working pretty well. We're going to lose on purpose. The score is 0, but the best score is 7. Why is that? Why is my score 0? Start game. Where am I setting the score? Let's go down. When I lose, the score becomes 0, but I want to only set the score when I start the game. Sorry for that. And we can run again. We can run the game and see if we don't lose. Best score is 1. Score is 1. We can start again. Let's try again. And we are losing. Let's try again and get past that. And you see that best score is 3. My score is 3. I can try to run again and lose on purpose here. And you see that it is working exactly the way we want. So now that we are done with the game, I want to go back in widget CPP and remove these grid lines because I don't want them. They are done with the job. I can run again and the game is here. I can try playing. And this is really cool, isn't it? We were able to build this project using the knowledge we learned in this course, and it is pretty cool. So I challenge you to try and improve on this game. If there is something you don't like, you can build it. Now you have the knowledge and you can make it as good as you want. We're going to stop here in this lecture, and I really hope you enjoyed this series on building this game here. In the next lecture, we're going to start and build a painting application that is going to be equally cool. I can actually show you that application to kind of spice up your appetite. We're going to have a painting application like this. We're going to be able to write stuff, hello world, for example. We're going to be able to draw shapes by dragging and releasing like this. We can draw all the shapes we have drawn before. We can erase stuff, and we're going to be able to do all kinds of crazy things. So go ahead and finish up here and meet me in the next lecture.